Thank you for joining. My name is Dan Mazzella. I'm the Director of Platform Development and DevOps for IBM TRIRIGA. And today's new release technical enablement session is going to be about the new Admin Console API that is in beta in the Platform 3.8.0. Let's get started. What we'll talk about today is a general overview of the Admin Console API, what the use of the API is, how we envision it to be integrated into your DevOps and even your ProdOps for running TRIRIGA. We'll go into a deep dive and an architecture overview, give some sample tools that can be used to test and develop with the Admin Console API, talk about authentication and authorization, and talk about what things we can make calls on, go into a bit of troubleshooting, and then talk about the references. So why would you use the Admin Console API? Well, automation is a very big topic these days, and if you've ever tried to automate your existing TRIRIGA servers, you know that it is very difficult. So with this new API, you'd be able to automate the configuration and runtime settings of your TRIRIGA servers, along with monitoring the overall health of the system. The goal is to provide you with the capability to have high availability and add capacity to things like running your synchronous agents. The Admin Console API is REST JSON based. Again, you can use it to automate your TRIRIGA infrastructure and to really sustain the running of the system. You can do things like monitor performance and then automatically take actions to resolve issues. Most functions in the existing TRIRIGA Admin Console right now have an analog in the new REST API. What I mean by analog is there's typically a one-to-one correlation of what you can do in terms of actions or viewing information in the existing Admin Console with the REST-based API. So again, the Admin Console API is organized around REST-based calls. We have a predictable resource-oriented URLs. We accept form-encoded request bodies and return standard JSON responses. We use standard HTTP verbs, standard HTTP authentication, and response codes so that you can depend upon the results that you receive from the Admin Console API. How do you use it? Well, you're going to need to have to create a REST client. You can do this in any modern language, Java, Node.js, Golang, Python. This REST client will need to authenticate and get a JSession cookie token to be able to make those calls. Then in your REST client, you can do things like make HTTP GET to get info, and then anything that performs an action or makes changes, you'll do via HTTP post, put, or delete verbs. So to get started, I have an example here using just standard curl. So to get started, you will need to authenticate and get a JSession ID cookie token. And you'll need to pass that to any subsequent calls in order to make sure that you are authenticated and authorized to make the various REST calls. So for example, using curl, you would make a curl command with the post to the URL of HTTP, optional HTTPS, // your server host name with the optional port number, / the optional context, / HTML en default admin verify.jsp. So that is the URL you will use to get your authentication. Then you need to pass in some form-based parameters. The object ID needs to be 1000. The action ID must be 1002. And then you need to provide it a username and a password. Again, with the -F if you're using curl. The output is not needed. You don't need to worry about that output. You can send it off to dev null. You can put it elsewhere. And then you do want to save the cookies off. And in curl, you do that with the -C cookies.txt or whatever you want to name your cookie file. Curl uses a library. And when using WebSphere Liberty, you'll get a JSession ID token that looks like that long string of characters down below. The session is only alive for a short period of time. It is dependent on your application server setting. By default, the short period of time is 30 minutes, but you can extend that by using the session expiration servlet. When you send a action equals update to the session expiration servlet by using either a get or a post, then it will extend the session, or it will let you know if your session is expired. So for example, in curl, you're not worried about, you're just getting a location and of type, the request type is post, and you give that base URL, the same one that we used on the previous slide, the http:// your server your port / your context path. And then you do the /session expiration.jsp. And then you can either pass the cookie on the command line here, or you can use the -B option to read it from the cookies file. And again, there are two possible responses. Active means the session is alive and well, or expired, meaning you do not have a current session. So now that you're authenticated and you verified that you have access, what are some of the things you can get? Well, this is an example request to where you can get the KPI, the key performance indicators of the server. So if you make a request to http:// your application server, your port, / your context, /API, /v1, /admin, /performance, /KPI, you'll get a response body that looks somewhat similar to the following. So here you'll get the key performance indicators of this particular server. How much Java memory in terms of the heap is being used, is free and is total. How many users are logged in. How many workflows have been completed. How many items are in the extended formula queue. What percentage of the CPU usage, if it's able to be calculated, is in use. How many workflows have been started in this environment. The cache info, how many hits, how many objects are in the cache, how many misses, and what that ratio is. The total number of workflow events per minute, and this is number of workflow events, not number of workflows. Remember, one workflow event can spawn off many multiple workflows. So this is just the total number of events executed. Next thing is the total number of workflows that have failed, and this is since the server has started. The number of active database connections, the number of workflow events in the queue, and then the total number of workflow steps that have processed. Now, this is different. These are the actual workflow steps that are included in the queue. So sometimes we hear that workflows are stuck. Well, maybe the workflow processing isn't actually stuck. It has just gotten into an infinite loop. That total number of workflow steps processed is a way that you can see if the workflow engine is truly stuck and stopped, or is it processing something in an infinite loop. We'll talk about another verb now, and this is, we're going to want to update the workflow agent, update whether or not it is saving the instances. And we have 5 different possibilities for workflow instance saving. So if you make a request method of post to your base URL /admin /v1, or I'm sorry, /API/v1/admin/workflow agent info/workflow instance/update, an instance name and giving it the actual name of one of those values below, then you'll get a response based on what you just sent it to. Again, we recommend in a production system that you use errors only. We also have something new, I believe it was back in the 3.7 release, which is data load mode, which this will not save any workflow instances at all. So if you're doing a data load and you don't really care about errors or problems in your workflows, you can have that and you'll get very fast loads when you are doing data loads and processing workflows. Okay, so let's do a little demo here. I have a Postman collection up. Just switch over to that. So what we have here, I have a collection in Postman of all the different things that we currently support, and more will be added to this list as we move along. But the first thing I want to do is look at this login. So I have a server here running on my local network, 10.19.76.21:8001. My context path is /dev, and we're going to go ahead and log in now. So I'm going to send this. And if we take a look at the cookie, it will give us this JSession ID and cookies. Now, Postman is nice because it will maintain and keep the cookies for you. If we come over here to code, and we take a look at like curl, you'll notice that it actually puts the cookie here directly in curl on the command line. If you wanted to save this initial authentication to a cookie file, you would replace this header with that -c and give it the cookies.txt. The other nice thing about Postman is it does give you some code templates for other languages, like here's Go and Golang. This is just a native Golang, giving it your URL, what method, what the payload is. So this is the object ID, the action ID, and then the username. You can, oh, look at this. You can see that I am using the default system and admin. Again, if you have a user that has admin console access, you'll want to change that in there as well. And then again, you'll have to take a look and read through some Golang techniques to do session and cookie management. This is just putting the cookie directly in the Golang code. So that's probably not what you'll want to do if you're actually writing a Golang REST client to help administer your TRIRIGA application. So then the REST client is going to do the request, and you'll get back an error code and a response. And then we're going to defer the body response close and then actually read all the bytes from the response body using IOUtil in Golang. And Golang, if you don't know, it can return multiple objects, multiple items back from a function call. And so we are interested in the body, but if there is an error that happened, we want to make sure if the error is not equal to nil, that means that there was a problem, there was an error. It's going to print the error out and then return. But the thing that you're most interested in is this body. So this example in Postman will give you just the response, just printed out to the standard console of what the body is, and you'll see what the JSON response is there. So typically what you would do in Golang is the response would be in JSON format. So you'd need to unmarshal that into whatever data object that you have so that you can do further actions on that. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is make sure our session is there and active. So again, in Postman, we have the second session expiration. We're making call to session expiration, and we're making sure that's updated. When you send this, you get the body back, and you can see that we are active. If you don't know, the session expiration servlet will extend the session by 30 minutes or whatever that default in your application server is. So now we can start doing some interesting things. We can start looking at all these different items in the admin console API. This first one, Just going to show you the scheduler manager. So within the TRIRIGA API, we have, I'm logging into the same system now. So we have the scheduler info. So we have this info right here and your daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly. Come back here, and you can see that the daily period is 100, weekly is 150. So you can verify that. That's great. That's not all that interesting, is it? Let's go on to getting the database. I'm going to run this API/v1/admin/database info. This is just getting the same database info that you would see back in the admin console, just in that JSON format. So the current time from the database server, if it's multi-byte support, so shame on me, I don't have multi-byte support in my database. What my character set is, the database code set, what the length semantics is, and the string units. Some of these things are for DB2, some of these things are for Oracle, and some of these are for SQL Server. So if you see some things that are null in here, that means that it is not applicable for your database type. Another call you can make is getting your indexes. This is somewhat interesting. So you can see here that these are all the indexes that we have on the database. So what the index name is, what table it's going on, and then when it was last updated. So right here, this is the time it was last analyzed. So I just happened to analyze it about an hour ago or hour and a half ago. So I'm good here. But you can then perform actions on this or do things within your DevOps or ProdOps environment. If you see that there's like an index that hasn't been analyzed in more than, let's say, 48 hours, you can then take action on that. Okay. The key performance indicators, the KPI, is another example. We're making the call to the API v1 admin performance KPI, and the response we get back. The Java CPU percentage, we can't determine it. I just happen to be on an operating system that it can't determine what percentage of the Java CPU is in use, so that's -1. We can go ahead and ignore that. How many hits, misses, total requests, and the ratio is, the number of workflows processed, complete, failed, etc. All right, next we'll take a look at the build number. I'm on a dev environment here, so this will look different in your environment. So the build number you'll actually see is a 5 or 6 digit number. And then the client info, this is what we use internally in our Git repository to see where things were built from. What platform release, this would be 3.8.0 in the case for this recording. The language pack release, so this is interesting. If you're coming from an older release and you've done a platform upgrade, but your language pack may not be up to date, you can make that determination here of what version your language pack is at. So maybe you have some things are not being translated, and they're well, let's call them platformy type of things. You may see a difference there in that version number of the language pack versus your platform. And then the database build number, again, I'm on a dev environment, so I'm at -1, but in your actual system, this change number up here and this value down here of the database information should be the same. And then patch history. This will let you know if you've done any fix packs of the history of your environment, and any of those fix pack scripts. Anytime you do that fix pack will be shown there. All right, so this next one is the agent status. I don't know why Postman isn't formatting this correctly, but what this gives you is for a given agent. So here, like the SMTP agent, it has an ID of 190. It's not starting up on anything, and it's not running. So this correlates back to the analog of what's in the admin, the old admin console for here. So each one of these has its own unique ID. And so you can come to find out that the data connect agent, if we look here, the Data Connect agent is actually ID 197. You can see that it's not configured to run on any host, and it is actually stopped. So with this new REST API, we can now make a request to start this. So we're going to start the Data Connect agent on the local host with the startup ID. This is the actual key that's important, is 197. Again, we're going to verify that the Data Connect agent, it is in a stopped status, and it is not set to start on any server. So we're going to start this now. Go back to Postman, and we're going to send this post request. And you can see now that the Data Connect agent is now running on this host name. Come back to the admin console, and we refresh this agent page, and here it is running on the admin console. All right. There is some other things that we're going to talk about. So the beta documentation, we do have some beta documentation. It will be posted somewhere. Stay tuned on that. But the best place to get updates right now is the beta, the TRIRIGA beta Slack channel. So if you're not familiar with that, open up TRIRIGA Slack. So we have this admin console API now, and we have just a rough PDF of the existing documentation and what you can do as of December 18th at 4:26 p.m. Pacific time. This is fairly up to date to what is there in 3.8. Again, it is still beta, so things can and will change. In the 3.8, there are some limitations, and those are listed out in the release notes. For any of those new updates, please stay tuned to the admin console API channel on the IBM TRIRIGA beta Slack at https://ibm-tririgabeta.slack.com. The limitation is this is not really meant for production use at this time. There are still some bugs and some things that you can read about in the release notes, but you can begin planning and testing and seeing what interesting apps and what interesting orchestration you can do with that right now. One word of warning, the APIs will change between the beta that is in the 3.8.0 and whenever we do decide to GA release this. We still have that V1 heading. We are not going to change that between the beta and the V1. So just plan accordingly. Please plan accordingly. If you try to consume any of those endpoints, plan that they will change by the time this is VA. So that includes any of the endpoints and the JSON response. Some of those responses will change. It's not they could change. They are going to change. So please make use or make plans for that accordingly. I want to thank you all. Hopefully this is of great use to you. I know that we are going to use this internally in our own DevOps environment and in use elsewhere. So thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day.